Alright guys, we're going to continue building our authentication application by adding validation to our sign up form. So as you can see right now, we have this sign up form that doesn't have any client side validation on it, but we can get error messages from the server when we have any errors in the form. So we want to fix that by adding some client-side validation. So if a user entered a wrongly formatted email or a password that's maybe below 6 characters, we want to display an errors. We want to display some errors and also disable this sign up button if the form is invalid. So let's quickly do that. So I'm right here on my sign up component.html, and right now we just have the ng submit submit form handler, and we have this method, but we can add some other properties to our form to implement validation on it. First thing I would like to do is to give the form a name. So I'm just going to give it the name, just call it form. You can call it whatever you like. And now I'm going to also set up a template variable. So I'm going to set that to be ng form. All right, so we have a form name of this form and template for ng form. And also we want to sign up if this form is valid. So I'm going to check for that. And the way I can do that is to say f.name, which is the name of our form, f.form, sorry, f.form dot valid. So if our form is valid, then we want to sign up. So we can do it this way. And now we want to also disable our sign up button if the form is invalid. So one way we can do that, here on our sign up form, we can bind the button to a disabled property. So this disabled property, we can bind it to the form. So we can do f.form.invalid. So we want to disable that form if it's invalid. Alright, so I'm going to save that, and you can see that the form is still not disabled. The button is still not disabled because this our form right now looks valid. So we have to add some validation to make it invalid. So one thing we can do is to add the required validation here. So we make all this field required, and I'll do same for the confirm password. I'll make it required, and if I save that now, you see that our form is disabled because these values are required, and you need to enter values for them for it to be enabled. Now you see it's enabled after I entered values for them. Alright, so that's one way we can disable our form. Next thing I want to do is I want to have access to the input. So to the input property, and also for the password, I also want to set validation for the minimum length. I want it to be more than 6 characters. So I'm going to say min length and set this to be 6. So if I save that now and our form is disabled, I enter some characters, it's still disabled, and when it's up to 6, then it's enabled. So we want more than 6 characters for our password. And for our confirm password, nothing happens there because we are not binding it to any field right now. So let's quickly update that in our TS file. So we need another property to hold the confirm password. So just like we have for the email and password, let's also set up one for confirm password. So I'm going to say confirm password, and I'm going to initialize it to an empty string just like for the other ones. And here in our sign up component, we can bind that with our ng model. So I'm going to do that here. Banana in the box ng model is equal to user.confirm password. So that's our confirm password, and we also want to make it required and minimum characters of 6. We can also implement this here. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. So that looks good. Let me just quickly save it and we can try it. We have our email, we have our password 1 2 3 4 5 6. You see it's still disabled. Our confirm password 1 2 3 4 5. Oh, there's 6. So now it's enabled. All right, so we've set up the validation right there. So we also need to display some messages to give the user feedback about what is happening, like why is the field disabled and what errors we have. So we can do that by also setting the template variable on each of the input field. So we can start with the email. So I'm going to have a template variable for the email, and I'm calling it email input just because we already have the ID set to email, and we are binding that to this for label right here. So I don't want the clash of names, so I'm going to use email input for that, and I'm going to set it to ng model. All right, I'm going to do the same for the password. So here we're going to have a template variable of password input, and I'm going to set it also to ng model. And finally we do one more for the confirm password template variable confirm password, just with the confirm password input, and I'm going to set it to ng model. Good. So now we have access to all those input properties. The next thing, we want to display those messages, so the error messages that we would get if there is an error. All right, so how do we display these messages? We can do it inside a div. So we want to create a div inside. So this is for the email. So I'm going to have a div. We're going to style those with bootstrap classes later, but for now let's display the messages. So the way we can do that, we can do that with the div here, and then we're going to use ngIf. So ngIf the email input. So email input, if it has some errors, there we got some, and let's make sure that the error is required. So there we can put some messages and say email is required. And we can also add validation to make sure that it's really an email address, and we can do that by setting it to email. And then here we want to, let me just copy this div and I'm going to paste it here. Email input error required, and the other one would be email. So I'm going to call it email, and here the message we want to show is that email must be a valid email address. Alright, so I'm going to save it. And when do we want to show this message? We want to show this messages if, so I'm going to use an ngIf to show this messages if the email is invalid. So the email input, if that is invalid, we want to show those messages. Let's try that and see if it works. So here we get this message that email is required, and here if I type in something, you see it must be a valid email address. So we are getting those messages. Let's quickly do the same for the password. So to make it easy for me, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to the password right here. I'm going to paste that here. And for the password, I'm going to use password input. If it's invalid, password input. If it has errors, and password input. And the next one is not an email, but we use minimum length, so I'm going to use minimum length right here. And here we want to say password must be at least 6 characters. Let me spell that right. And here I just simply say password is required. Alright, so we are getting those messages even when we haven't done anything. So we can display those messages if the input box has been touched. So not when we didn't do anything and we are just seeing those messages. Might be scary. So let's do email.input.invalid and email input.touched. Yes, that one. And I'll do the same thing for the password and email input.touched. Good. So I'm going to save this, and now we don't have any message, and I touch it and I leave it. You see the email is required, and then I try to enter something, it's not valid. But then when I enter a valid email address like this, you see we have no errors, and this password is showing this because it has been touched. I enter some values, now it's good. Alright, we can also do the same thing for confirm password. So I'm going to copy what we have there and paste them on confirm password. And here can display those messages. So here it's confirm password input. Also here it's confirm password input, and I'm just going to copy this, replace it with the password input. I'm going to do a command D here, command V, looks good. So here we can still leave the password is required and password must be at least 6 characters because that's still the password. Alright, let's save it and try. So for the email, I touch it, and if I don't enter anything, email is required, I enter an email. And for password, we enter the password, confirm password, see password is required, and there you go. But the issue is that this password doesn't match with this password. So we need to set up a validation. It's called cross-field validation to make sure that the value entered here and the one entered here are matching. So we're going to be doing that later. But for now, I would like to add some colors to show the user that there are some errors with this form. And we'll be doing that with a class in Bootstrap called the invalid class and invalid feedback. So if we go to Bootstrap, let's go to Bootstrap 5, and if you go to the document, if I go to invalid fields, you see we get this type of invalid messages here to the form. And what you have to do is just you put the is invalid and the invalid feedback. So I'm just going to quickly copy this class invalid feedback. This is what we'll use to display those messages. And right here for the email where we are displaying this messages, let's add that class there. Say class, and we want to add invalid feedback. So here I'm going to add an invalid feedback. I copied it, so I'm going to paste it. There you go. Now I'm going to copy everything with the class right here. Copy it, and we want to do that here. Add that class, and for the confirm password right here we want to add the class. Good. So if I save it now and then we don't get the error messages anymore. Something is wrong. Let's just take that back. Let me just save it. Now our error messages are coming again, and make sure I was adding it to this div. So class invalid feedback. Let's try this one more time. Save it in my confirm password. Alright, so we don't get those values here. Let's try the other one, which is the is valid class. So it shows this border around the form with these values, and we want to display those messages, and we can use ng class to bind it if the name is touched and the value is invalid. Let's try that. So I'm just going to break off this line just to have some space here, and I'm going to use ng class. So ng class is equal to, and we're going to have an object inside, and we want to bind that is invalid property right here, and then we're going to have the email input dot if it's touched and if it's invalid. Alright, crossing my fingers for this to work because I don't know why the other one didn't. So yes, so we have this border around it showing that there is an error with it. So the is invalid class work, but there is something wrong with the invalid feedback class. So let's do this for this other, let's do it for the other field. So I'm going to copy this ng class, and we go to this other fields, I'll break it up here like I did for the other one, and here I'm going to paste it, and instead of email input I'm going to have their password input. See what we have. Alright, so here we have the error there, and now if I try the other class, invalid feedback, if I save it now, yes, we're getting the message is red now. So I guess they go together. So if you're using the invalid feedback, you also need to use it with the is invalid class. Alright, so I'm going to copy this over now, and I'm going to paste it here and do the same thing for our confirm password. But for our confirm password, let's see the magic. So here we get email required with our error message here. Same thing for the password. How about this? We don't get anything here, and the reason is because we haven't added the is invalid class there, so that has to come before the other one. For some reason, I don't know why, but you have to do it that way. So let's quickly do that. Break this up again like we did for the other ones. I think I have that one copied over. No, so I'm going to copy it again, which is the ng class here. Copy it over, and then here I'm going to paste it. So there we have ng class is invalid. This password input should be confirm password. So let me do a command D there and then put confirm password. Okay, now I'm going to save this. So good. If I go here, here, now we are getting all those error messages. If I try to type something, it's not valid. Now if I enter a valid email address, error gone. I enter the password, see it's good. I enter the other password, it's good. So our validation messages are working, and the validation classes are also working. Now the next thing we would like to do is to work on this confirm password, which is the cross-field validation. So the password we enter here must match with the other password that we have entered here. So how do we do that? We need to create what they call a directive in Angular. So we create a directive for that, and then we update a class, we override the class that is given to us there, and then we use that class in the form. So but the first thing we need to do is to create our directive. So I need to bring in my terminal. Let's generate a new directive. So we're going to generate the directive ng g for generate. This time we want to generate the directive. Let me spell it full. And we want to generate that in, let me put it in a helper folder, and the name of our directive is must match. So both password must match. And does it have test? Because I don't want any unit test. Yes, so we have our must match directive generated for us. So a directive is just basically it's just a service that has different classes. So let's see what it looks like. Our must match directive, I'm going to close this up. So we have our must match directive here, and we're going to be working on this class. So you see it's just a simple directive, and we can use it with this app must match, right? So we're going to implement, this class should implement another class that is called Validator. So it's going to implement the Validator class. So this one. Good. Now it's given me an error because I need to implement the interface. So the validator method have this validate interface that we must implement, right? So this directive, I need to specify a provider where I can use it. So I'm going to add providers here, and I'm going to add an array. So here I have provide, and I'm going to add ng validators right here, and I'm going to add ng validators, and I'll set use existing to be true. No, use existing, I'm going to add must match directive, and finally I'm going to add multi to be true. Alright, you just want to add all of this setup in your providers array. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to save that, and now we're going to work on our validate method. Now our validate method takes in a control. It's an abstract control. So the abstract control is the highest value of abstraction for the different controls for the form group or the form control. So I want this abstract control actually to be a form group. So just to be more specific, so I'm going to call this a form group, and instead of having the abstract control, I'm going to be more specific and use a form group. Alright, and we want to return a validation errors, and here in this method I simply just use return this dot, I want to call a method here must match validator. So we have a must match validator. It's going to take two parameters. The first parameter would be the first field, so must match, and I'm going to set it to an array like so, and then the other one is the other field, so this dot must match, and I'm going to set it to 1. And also you want to pass in the form group right here. Alright, so we need to define this. So declare this must match property right here, and also we want to declare this method right here. Okay, let's say it returns any, so that I return something. And for the must match, let's make it an input. So let's use the input property here from Angular, and this would be the must match type here, and we have this must match, and let's just import this quickly right there. And the type of that is, let's make it a string array, and let's initialize it to string array. So we have this string array must match, which is going to take the value of this field and this field. So this one is 0, first element of the array, and this is the other one, and then we are passing this form group in. Alright, so let's go ahead and create the method. So the values we are passing, so first one is the control name, and that's a string, and the other one is a control name. So let me call that the matching control name. So I'm going to say matching control name. And that's also a string. Alright, so these are the two values passed. And now let's implement this method. So we want to return something. We want to return a form group. So form group of type form group, like so. And we need to do some checks. So the first thing we want to check, so we get the variable to hold the first control, and that would be that form group that was passed in. Check the controls with the control name, which is this value right here, and we do the same thing for the matching control name. So I'm going to say matching control, and this would be equal to our form group dot controls, and I want to pass in matching control name. Alright, so I have those two. Now the first thing I want to do, I want to return null. I want to return null if the control haven't initialized. So let's quickly do that. So if not control or the matching, not the matching control, so it hasn't initialized, but we want to return null. So return null. That's it. And if it has any errors, so if one other validator has found an error already, so I'm going to do this other check. So I'm going to say matching control dot errors, and not matching control dot errors, then I use the must match right here, must match. And if that happens, I also need to return null. And where we want to set the validation message is if the control dot value, so if the control dot value of the first control does not match with the matching control dot value, so if they don't match, now we're going to return an error. So I'm going to say return matching control dot, I'm going to set the errors, and I'm going to set must match to be true. So we have some errors because they didn't match. So must match, set that to be true. And finally, one last thing, I'm going to return the matching control let's set errors. I'm going to return that to be null. Alright, so we created our must match directive. We're not using this abstract control, we're actually using the form group and our must match validator. We also need to import this in our app.module. So in our app.module, we need to import this our must match directive before we can use it. So I'm going to go, not that, I'm going to Command P and I'm going to go to app.module.ts, and in our imports, oh, I already have it imported directly from me when I generated it from the terminal, so that's good. So now we can use this must match directive in our application. So we want to quickly go over to the sign up page and use that. So I'm going to do Command P and I'm going to go to sign up component. Let me open this a little bit. I'm going to go to the sign up component, and at the top of our form we need to set up that array of the control values. So I'm going to set up array of for our must match right here. I'm going to set it to 2 values. So we have one for the password and we have the other one for confirm password. Okay. It's not the known property of the form, it was imported. Let's see, it's password input. This confirm password input. No, this is just for the controls. I can use this too. Alright, I just don't know why I'm having this error. Let me try to use the value in here. So if I try to use if and ng if, and I use confirm password input dot errors dot, and I try to use must match, and here I can say password must match. Okay, but then we're still having these errors here. because we are calling this must match, and I think the name was app must match. In our directive we have this input must match, and here is app must match. Let me quickly copy this. Right here. Okay, I'm going to pause the video and fix this error and come back. Alright guys, so let's quickly fix the error. So to fix the error, first thing you want to head over here to the must match directive class, and we want to call this must match because that's what we defined here as our input, and this was match that. So I'm going to save that, and now you see that we don't get any more errors right at the top here. So now our must match directive looks good. And another thing we want to correct is this input right here. So we don't want to use that input, we just want to use the password and confirm password, right? So since we are switching that to password and confirm password, another thing you might want to just remove this for right here, and let's remove the for the password as well. Let's just remove that for now, we can add it later. And for the name right here, we can call it confirm password, and also for this ID here, let's make it confirm password. And since we are no longer using that for the input, let's remove the input everywhere we have input. So I'm going to highlight the input, and I'll do Command D everywhere we have input, and then I'm going to delete the input. So that way we just have confirm password right there. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to do the same thing for the password input. So I'm going to go over to where we have the input here. I'm going to do Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D, and I'm going to delete those inputs. And while doing that, I've seen that here we're using email, so we want that to be password. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and I think now is looking good, so we can try it out quickly. And I have this message with Chrome. So if I don't enter any validation, we're still getting our validation error for the password. Let me just say password of password. Okay, that works. And if I type pass, you see I get password was must match because I didn't type the correct password. And when I type it password, you see they match now, and I don't get any more errors, guys. So that's how we can implement the validation for the errors. Alright guys, so this is where I'll be wrapping up with this video. We have our confirm password implemented now, and it's working. So if I type password and I type password, when they match we don't have any error, so it looks good even if our for highlighting doesn't work, but we still have the effect that what we are looking for. Alright, so we'll end this video here, and in the next video we're going to modify our sign up form to be able to accept the user's name. So we're going to be creating a new service for the user, and we'll create the model as well for the user that would include the name of the user, and we'll be doing this in the next video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.